And a very big hello, everybody. Welcome along to Sim Stuff, a podcast dedicated to simulators. Proudly brought to you by Player1 Sim Gear. This is episode 1. Hello and welcome to Sim Stuff, a brand new podcast that takes a look at everything simulator related. Each week we will bring you interviews and chats with people from the industry, from cars to flight simulator groups, to help you get a better insight into what's out there and maybe potentially enhance your experience. We're proudly supported by Player1 Sim Gear, which also gives us the opportunity to give you a rundown of the new hardware that is available as well. Well, that's enough about us, so let's get stuck into it. My name is Grant, however you may know me as HK Racing, and Neil joins me, and you might better know him as Recon.
G'day Grant, how are you, mate?
I'm really good, thank you. Look, this podcast is much needed in Australia, I think.
Yeah, look, we're pretty stoked to be able to bring, I guess, an Australian-centric view on all things sim racing, sim flying. We're going to touch on a bit of sim farming. We're going to talk to some sim truck drivers. And yeah, really, I guess, highlight what's happening out there, both from certainly in terms of the hardware that's available and what's happening in the world, but also what the communities are doing. So we want to talk to people who are involved in running league races. We want to talk to people who are involved in running squadrons and community events and find out what's going on and how people can get involved.
And I love Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I love Euro Truck Simulator. Mind you, when I do it, I've got to tell you, Neil, I'm doing it with a Formula One wheel, but hey, why not? Why not?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You can fly a plane with an F1 wheel, no problem.
Well, not the plane, but definitely the Euro Truck. I've actually got all the plane gear as well, all the Airbus gear and that, and it's a lot of fun. It is so much fun. We're going to be chatting a little bit later with Luke Holland, who runs a league for V8 supercars. And Neil, you've had the chance to play in that. You said it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. The V8 Vets is it's kind of unique, I guess, in that they cater for drivers over 40, which I ticked over a couple of years ago. So I'm pleased to be representing the younger part of the league. But no, it's fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with Luke about all things V8 Vets and how it works.
But to begin with, we've had the most amazing opportunity that anybody that's involved in sim racing could possibly want. We had the chance to chat with an esports coach, Adam Stevens.
Yeah, absolutely. Really stoked to get Adam on board. Why don't we kick into it and let's find out who he is and what he does.
As we begin our league racing careers, we're looking at ways to try and move up the evolutionary ladder. Well, a man who's been able to do that since a very young age is Adam Stevens. He's climbed to the ranks of being a driver coach and is contracted to the Alpine esports team. We started off by asking him, where did the sim racing experience begin for him?
So it all began, I think, when I was about 4 years old. So I originally had a PS2, and I've still got all my games from my PS2 actually right in my bedroom on my shelves below. So I used to play a lot of F1 when I was a kid. So I had F1 2002. Load of old Toyotas on there, and what always was the big memory about that was you always had like Sega Rally, the virtual mirror, but on F1 2002, when you touched the rear wing of another car, that was the only part of the car that flew off the car, and when they spun out, there's always like a white plume of smoke going around. And when I was a kid, I used to play like a lot of games like that, and I also played stuff like Colin McRae 2005, Colin McRae, I think it was Colin McRae 3 that I had at the time.
Classic game.
Yeah, you had the one with the Subaru on the front, obviously Colin's car on there, and then you had the one with the Ford Fiesta, no, was it Ford Focus when he changed teams between 2005, I think, and then I played other games like Juiced, Need for Speed Underground, so everything like that. Obviously, as a kid, maybe I shouldn't have been playing those games, but I learned quite a lot from all of them, but pretty much always just go around with the PS2 on the controller, play all of them. It was actually when, I think as well, I had a wheel for a little bit, so I got it was like one of the original Thrustmasters for the PS2. It was like a little Ferrari one, kind of useful for my, like, being very small at the time. It was useful for me, but every time I had to set it up, it was always in my living room, and I had to get a table chair screw in the bottom of it, and then to keep the plastic pedals in place, you had to put them in between the chair and pray they didn't move. And there was that much time I was playing Colin McRae with it because it was so fun, even though like the force feedback was non-existent. It was awesome to play for hours on end. But because I was actually still bare on the controller at that point, it kind of drove me away from using the wheel for a little bit. But essentially that's how I grew into it, and then I got a PS3 and then moved on to other games on there. But that's kind of when, for a little bit, my sim racing stuff died down because I think about when I was 11. So I've actually still obviously got an extended background in simulation. I moved over to Flight Sim for a little bit because I think after F1 2012 on the PS3, because I got all the F1s up to that point, kind of lost interest for a little bit. And then I think it was about 2017, 2018, I got kind of the spark again to get into racing. So I got onto PC because I'd moved over to PC because my friends had been badgering me for ages to do that. And then I joined my first F1 league because I'd played a lot offline for ages. It's kind of when esports was first starting. So I joined my first league in September 2018, and that was just simply by a Steam forum. And then I played on controller, and I remember, God, this was actually a specific story. I remember at the time, I just started university and I started working at a chippy, but started league racing at the same time. But kind of at the same time, I had the urge to league race a lot, and obviously it couldn't drive me away from it. But then over time, I essentially through 2018 to 2019, that's where I kind of learned everything from the first league, and then it merged into another one. And then I think it was about May 2019, I'd learned a lot from both of the leagues that I was in, and then I joined my friends' league. And then essentially from there, that's where I started, where I'm up to the point now, because it was actually kind of a funny story of how it all happened, because my friend was Danish. She was a year younger than me, but the problem was with the league, he was only getting 7 people on for the first race, and then for the first few rounds it struggled. So what we did was I essentially came in as an admin, helped him sort it all out. So we changed the race date. We, instead of driving, we essentially then started casting the races. So me and him I was commentating because at the time my internet was not capable of streaming, and then we basically streamed all the first season, which we still actually have, which is kind of amazing on YouTube. And then essentially I, from there, got into league management. Well, obviously I was still driving, but I was doing league management. And through that, essentially, I started building up the league. But what I started doing was trying to do different things to everything in the community at the time, because the small circle that I was in to begin with, this was like a time before PSGL and WR even existed on PC. And I think there was actually only still on one console, because obviously PSGL has been going for God knows how long, like nearly a decade now. And
just for Adam, just for those of the listeners who aren't familiar, so PSGL is one of the Formula One racing leagues that you're involved with.
PSGL is Premier Sim Gaming Leagues, and that's essentially where you'll find all the esports drivers racing in and World Online Racing. So they're essentially the two biggest leagues on PC. I think PSGL have only got a PlayStation and PC division at the minute, and WR have still got Xbox. But if you're looking for like any aspiring esports driver or any esports driver, like Lucas Blakely, David Tanitza, or anyone like that, that's where you'll find them racing. And that's kind of like the top level of league racing. And all these, foundations have been in place for ages. And basically is how you kind of move on. But I'll explain that in a little bit. Because it's essentially how I kind of started on my journey, because like them, obviously you have to grow from one spot. So I started looking at other leagues and finding little things that wasn't happening, or what this other league was doing, because there's kind of like a big divide at the time. Because for me, there was 2 leagues, like 3 or 4 little ones where there was like really fast drivers in there, but they didn't know how to connect to each other. So what I did was essentially asked all the drivers if they was interested in forming another league and basically getting them to race together and create a different league, so there wasn't racing in the same circle. And essentially that same tactic, I wouldn't say a tactic, it's kind of been like the same theme for me, is doing that and then building leagues up. And then over time it's just gone to the point where it became something that I think I was probably found what I was good at and wanted out of a league. Because at the one point when I first started it, I just wanted the league to basically be, something for a bit of fun. Then by the end of the first season, we ended up with 3 tiers. But over that time, that's kind of what built me up, making connections like in the community. And then that's essentially when we got to 2022 now. And obviously I'm now obviously working with Race Clutch as the F1 esports coach, but obviously in that role as well, he's working with Alpine F1 esports.
Yeah. So how did that happen? So talk us through that progression from being essentially from running, recreational leagues yourself and being a league admin to coming on board with Race Clutch and then being involved with Alpine.
It was just a chain of events, really. What happened at the time? I just finished university, and then I'd left my old team because I wanted a little bit of a break from league racing, and then I was still obviously running my league on the side at the same time, but I didn't kind of know obviously how to progress into esports at the time because a lot of teams were still, because obviously with the F1 esports series, I didn't like at the time I didn't know how it functioned. I knew like in 2017, 2018, it was still like an individual driver championship. So I think it was from like 2019 onwards. It obviously started becoming team orientated, so a lot of teams were signing up, and then just by chance, Race Clutch at the time, and I think like a few of the teams, was obviously looking for staff, and then essentially that's where it went from there. So I obviously did the usual process of a job interview, went from there, and originally I was just the academy manager, so I was running the academy team in a tournament called the Global Championship. And then around June, July time, that is when I became part of the Alpine setup. But just a distinction, obviously, I think maybe before you ask the question is a few obviously teams like obviously Red Bull are run by G2, and obviously Veloce have had affiliation with a few teams as well. So with Race Clutch, I'm a part of Race Clutch, and the team is basically partnered up with Alpine, so all the staff on the team work for Race Clutch on behalf of Alpine, basically. But obviously, we still have close ties between them. It still doesn't, it's still the team still runs as strong as ever, and communication is key between both. But it's essentially how I got into the role. But it's been obviously a big experience for me, and obviously I'm still learning as I go through. And we're coming up to event 4 now after doing 3 events, and I'm still even from that first time in 2019, I'm still learning new stuff because since then the community's changed a lot as well, and we're seeing a lot of things happen at the moment.
Adam, for those aspiring drivers out there, how difficult would you say it is to get to your level?
I mean, I've never really looked at it that way, obviously, of getting to my level, because I'm not really one of these people, who had. Obviously, you can have a drive to get to that level, but sometimes, obviously, you don't expect it for a certain point. I think in terms of drivers, if you're going for it, then you need to go through the F1 Challengers series, which is usually hosted between January and February. And the top 6 guys on each platform basically qualify for a pro license, which you need to be able to go to the pro draft, which is hosted at Silverstone in usually July time. So you get a nice trip there, and then you can also qualify through the DHL Fastest Lap Award, where the top 3 guys on each platform from the event also go. And then at that point, you pretty much then are in the hope of being picked up by a team. So like with this year, Luke Smith, who's currently obviously at Alpine, did the pro exhibition as he qualified through the time trial, and he was already in the Race Clutch Academy at the time. So once he got his pro license, we was able then obviously to sign him to the team, and that's how a lot of drivers are coming through. But I think the only thing I'd say is I'd like obviously to see a lot more guys coming through. Obviously, a lot of it at the moment is European orientated, just because of how the F1 esports series is. And I know, obviously, I'm on an Aussie podcast, and
yeah,
I know. Obviously, Neil's known me for a long time. Obviously, I've been part of the connections that I made. Obviously, have been through Aussie and American league racing on the, but I'm mainly on the European side. But obviously, I think for the Aussie side, Jack Humphreys went this year to Silverstone, and obviously, I think he's the only Aussie apart from Revo to get there. But for the Aussies at the minute, the only way really is to go through the time trial event, unless they have, some exception where they can go through challenges and, do that. Because I think obviously, like for you guys, for me, it's like 10:30 now, and for you guys, it's 9:30. So I think maybe just moving a little bit forward, in terms of obviously like the setup, it'd be cool, obviously, if we can see more guys from outside Europe being able to get in there, because obviously I'd like obviously that chain to be promoted outside of just Europe, but obviously that's only something F1 can do, and obviously as a team manager or anyone who's in a position like that, you have to work around with what you got.
Sure.
Yeah.
What does a team like Alpine look for when they're selecting a driver?
So when we're selecting a driver, I think that's more. I think that one is kind of like obviously being a coach, whether it be in football, Aussie rules football, anything like that. I mean, like obviously you've got a bit of racing experience as well. I think it's more on the commentary side. You've got Grant.
Yeah.
But I think usually it just comes down to the coach as well. Like with me, I'll look for someone obviously who works hard. They don't have to be obviously the fastest driver. Obviously, we'll have a look as well, if they've got potential or anything. But I just prefer someone who's hardworking, honest, and will be wanting to achieve that level in esports. Because I won't lie. You have to have a drive to be able to do it. And I think like with a lot of guys, sometimes they can get burnt out from doing it, but you need kind of prolonged drive to get there. And I think mainly, like I said, you don't need to be the fastest, but if you're willing to work, then there's every chance you can make it there, even if it takes a year or two.
So sorry, Adam, put that into context for me. So what sort of drive are we talking? Like, I mean, I'll practice a track for an hour and a half before a race, and I feel like I've got it on point. I mean, how much practice are these esports drivers actually putting in?
So in terms of practice, I think it's more, team specific. So just in terms, obviously, I commented on the Alpine one, we, treat it like a 9 to 5 job, but sometimes we'll be, working after 5 p.m, maybe into night, doing 2-3 extra hours. And then on event week, I'll just do an example. I think it was for event 3. We started at midday here, and we wasn't done till 11:30 in the evening on the staff side, because after the race, you start at 12 o'clock, usually, because you have practice at about 2:15 UK time, and then qualifying at 3:30. So you have a small window before a pretty long gap before the race, but obviously the guys still, working on the in-between, practicing, quality, race, everything before the race starts. But obviously it just depends on the team that you're in. But after the race, you then have to go through, the report channels. You have to wait for the report window to open, the report window to shut, and if there's an appeal, that can take time. And that's kind of like, the main thing is sometimes there's not really a defined amount of time, like, working your normal 9 to 5 job. It can go on a little longer. So
what does a typical practice schedule look like? I mean, are the guys running TT laps over and over again on their own? Are they practicing against the AI? Are they running in servers? What are they doing?
So I think that's kind of like a thing you can see in league racing as well. But I can kind of answer that one. Obviously, like with TT, all the conditions are perfect. So generally, guys just tend to use like quali sessions or GP mode to basically practice the conditions, because I think as a driver, yourself, the conditions in there are very different. Like in time trial, the force feedback feels a lot healthier, and as well, like on the setup, you'll see obviously like with the tire pressures and wings and ride height, the main differences obviously you'll see between time trial and quali, because obviously with quali you always go to minimum pressures, and then in time trial, like let's go with Australia for example. If you run about mid tire pressures and high on the rear, in time trial it feels excellent, but if you go into quali, the car just does not stick, and you have to make those adjustments. So that's how the guys obviously usually get to do that. Obviously for esports, there's a little bit different, obviously, because there's the esports build and everything, but that's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that kettle. I'm really curious. What is the esports build exactly, and how different is it from the one that we're playing?
I can't, well, obviously, for legal reasons, I can't mention everything. But really, mainly the only difference is just obviously like in the session, you basically just can launch sessions yourself. The timings are shorter in between each session, and that's pretty much all there is. So obviously, like when the guys can go on race day, all the tools and everything, because I mean, like even use OBS and everything to see the cameras in the race. Well, obviously get a clear connection for the guys racing, because obviously the guys back at Codemasters need to see what's going on. So obviously we have those little links and everything sorted, and that's kind of like what the esports obviously differentiates from the actual game. There's not really too much difference. It's just essentially like a few little things where you can launch your own session and everything like that.
So basically, if you do an 8-hour day, not 4 hours, isn't watching intros.
Yes.
Perfect. Let's get that. It's extraordinary when you think about, like Neil just mentioned that he does one session. I do multiple race runs to try and get an idea of what the tyres are going to do, and more like what they feel like. Say when I've got 45% wear on the tyres, where I need to be more cautious. When do you find that drivers get to a burnout level? What should they be aiming for? Say in like standard league racing, without going to that next professional level, what sort of hours do you think people should be putting in?
I think in terms of what hours are putting in, I don't think it's really the amount of hours to put in. I think it's the way they practice, pretty much. So, obviously, you can take any driver, for example, and if they're doing like 1 or 2 leagues a week, I mean, like 2's usually like a decent number. So you obviously, if you practice in the right way, though, it doesn't really matter. It's obviously like the quality over the quantity. So if you're obviously using like GP mode and quali mode to practice, then it sets you up for the better base, rather than just constantly grinding out TT going into the race. Then obviously being miles off the pace, even if you're on pace, you still might have a lot to learn. In terms of setup work, because obviously that's the big difference between TT and and obviously like league racing, the tire pressures and everything. That's what you kind of got to get into your head. But saying that, though, again, it just completely depends on the driver, and even like as a staff member, everyone has different skills. I mean, like I wouldn't say I'm a setup guru, but someone else might be know the setup of a car inside out, but they might not be able to do connection with leagues or anything like that. There's such a broad field on that front. There could be a role for essentially everyone, depending obviously what a team's for, or what that person's doing.
That's actually a really good question on the setups within your team. So if you're coaching a couple of drivers, will they typically run their own setups, or do you have a more standardized team setup so that you can kind of judge the performance of the drivers relative to each other?
And if so, where can we download them?
Yeah.
Neil, would you like to give the link out to Grant, please, to download them? Now, I think on that one, because obviously I can't reveal the specifics of the steps and everything, but I think in terms of what obviously I will say is obviously like in time trial and even league races, obviously you can see guys doing their own thing. Like a lot of drivers, I can't think of really any specific at this point. It's literally all just left my head. But obviously, some will prefer having an understeer car. Some will prefer having an oversteer car. Like the main thing, like I can mention on the game this year, is obviously like at the start of it, everyone always had front anti-roll bar and the front suspension in line with each other, and usually the rear anti-roll bar and the rear suspension drop down to 1. But then you rarely see, people inverting it on that front. And that's kind of the thing, obviously, like people have developed their own style. There'll be other little things within the setup, whether they want higher tire pressures, lower tire pressures, that you'll see them driving. I mean, like, obviously I can comment, like, Ruben and Luke have a very different driving styles. And, even Ryan Bell, obviously, I'm pretty sure you're more familiar with being from Oceania. They all have, like little different traits that they'll have, driving wise, that they'll obviously adapt, and obviously as a team that's what you work around, and it's kind of obviously like in the league as well. How you grow, you'll trade off ideas and build up that way.
Yeah, okay. So, look, I'm really conscious of time, Adam. When it's late for you, thank you. Can I ask, how big a role does social media play in a young driver? So if you're a sort of 15, 16, 17-year-old or early 40s-year-old aspirational driver, what do I need to do if I want to get into esports in terms of building up my social media following? Is that something you look for?
I'd kind of see it more as an advantage to being able to use it effectively, because if you can communicate through social media effectively, then you can build up a bigger base. But I wouldn't say it's really a necessity. I would say, like, obviously, in terms of social media for a team, for example, like you've seen how Otis Lawrence obviously is catching the world by storm at the minute, and I think just generally like Veloce as an example, obviously they're quite big on the media front, and obviously that's how like a lot of their guys are built up. Obviously, just with Race Clutch at the minute, we're kind of in the position. Obviously, I'm obviously not from France, but the founder Richard Arnaud does a lot with the French sim racing community. So on that front at the minute, we're still kind of in the process of being on the French side, and obviously we've got a big community there. But I wouldn't say it's really anything too big that you need to do. Obviously, play up. Some people are better than it at the others, but I think really at the end of the day, if you do the talking on track, then that's how you get the attention. While it's a good skill to have to be able to network, I think that's kind of something more that you learn over time, but it doesn't really obviously affect you to begin with. But I think it's kind of becoming a bigger part of the game now, that you still need to be able to develop that skill if you know how to use it correctly. Even like if you have 900 Twitter followers, it's not really I'd say the most efficient way. But if you know how to obviously talk to people or anything like that, then that will go further than showing off your fame to the world.
Neil's right with regards to the time frame. We're running a little bit over here, but I'm absolutely fascinated in what you're saying. If you were, and I know this is a question like how long is a piece of string, but if you were forced into answering this question, as a driver coach, what's the one single thing that you see that the majority of the drivers do incorrectly in their earlier years? Is there something that jumps out at you?
Oh, that's actually a really, really good question. I think from what I've seen is it can obviously be anything on track or off track. Usually, like with the on track stuff, like a lot of guys don't manage well. When they do strategies, they're still kind of locked into looking at other people racing. Obviously, like that's the thing. You have to look at it, but then as well, like it'll be like little things like ERS management, differentiating between quali and race setup, because usually, obviously, even with the top guys, there's like a difference between them, and that's the main thing I think guys don't look at. But obviously, that's something they build up and get used to. And I think like with the off-track stuff, a lot of guys, to be honest, I don't like mentioning Twitter, but with this one, I think if the depending on the person asked, I don't really think age is a limiting factor. But I think on Twitter, a few people jump the gun too quickly, type stuff they don't mean to, and then obviously it ends up in hot water at that point. And I think that's where people obviously learn as well to be more controlled in terms of obviously the stuff you say off track, because even though you can be a really nice person and you want to speak the world, you have to know your boundaries sometimes in what you say. You can obviously, like for me, I don't really use Twitter that much just because I prefer doing my job off track, and when I'm on Twitter I'll only really share the results or anything like that, obviously what we've done on race day if we're doing anything. But it just completely again depends on the person. But I think just how I've done it, I found just keeping without jumping in and diving into any drama or anything, essentially that's the best thing, and people look for it. It can be in any type of job, because the thing is with me as well, because I work two jobs. So I work obviously with Race Clutch as the F1 coach, and then I also work for a business that does sim racing stuff as well, but it's obviously just like a virtual reality arcade stuff. And that's kind of taught me the two worlds, because if you're working with that one, you got real life representation as well in person, then you can't be basically, going up to someone and giving them a giant F you in front of them, and then, expecting not to get in trouble. And that's kind of, the thing that I think as well, a few people in the virtual world don't realize on the outside, because I think as well, like when I was league racing, obviously I've made plenty of mistakes doing that. And there's been times where I'm like, why the hell did I do that like a year later? And, just being in the environment obviously teaches you like kind of set values of what you need to do in that case.
Do you think, Adam, is there a progression path building out in the world for sim racers to move out of the simulator world and into the real world of racing? Like, do you think we'll see a time when a Formula One team takes a sim racer into their actual racing academy?
Well, I hope so. I think at the moment we're still obviously kind of in the infancy of F1, for example, doing it, because I think it would be a really cool thing to see, because obviously like we've had Ken Bolabasi in F2 who did F1 esports in 2018 and actually driving F2 this year, and then we've got a few guys obviously like in league racing who do go-karting and kind of pushing on that front as well. So I think it'll be at some point, hopefully, it'll be really cool, obviously, to have a success story, from league racing all the way to go-kart, from go-karting as well up there. Because, I mean, like Nico Longe as well, obviously he's joined Alfa Romeo for this year, and he's also getting track time in an F4 car. So, we could see that happen at some point as well. Jarno, obviously, he was a Renault development driver in junior categories, and he's transitioned to esports. There'll be a point where someone does the complete deja vu to that and go from sim racing into actual F1.
Yeah. What do you reckon, HK? Is there hope for me yet?
I was encouraged when he said age is not a limiting factor. Look, Adam, I've only got one other question, and this is not self-serving, I promise you this. If somebody was looking for a driver coach, how can they go about it? Is there a way? Can they get in contact with you or the company you work for? What's the best way to go about taking that next step?
Can people reach out to you? Like, are you does Race Clutch offer coaching as a service for aspiring drivers?
I think it just depends on the person. Like, I'm always happy, to give people advice and answer them. I don't obviously like if there's a position available, then maybe we could say something, but it just completely depends on the time and the place. Mm-hmm. But actually, like I'll do a bit of promotion for my friend. But like at the moment, there's a company called Sim Racing Centre going around. And it's pretty much, guys there, getting experience in coaching, and, that's how they're working. If they're not in the team, obviously they're providing a service and a training base now for guys to, get onto the esports ladder. And also, pardon, I didn't mean to do that while I was drinking.
Yeah. One final question from me. What does the future hold for Adam?
What does the future hold for Adam at the moment? I am actually working out. I obviously, the main plan is I'll be around next year with Alpine, obviously doing the drive coaching at the moment. But I think hopefully it's essentially to try and obviously go into a full-time, position with F1 esports within the team, because obviously I'm working my second job at the minute. But I think kind of it has to work on the progression, that I'm able to, I will still, be continuing league racing. That's, not a matter of, question. I'll always do that because I love it as a hobby. But on the esports side, I'll, look to go as long as I can, basically, with it. Essentially, because obviously Neil will understand, obviously, from being a musician as well, playing guitar, it'll be essentially ride the wheels off it until the bus falls. Well, the wheels fall off the bus, basically.
Well, this is one chat that I'm looking forward to. At this spot regularly on Sim Stuff, we take a look at some of the leagues that are out there and opportunities for you to continue your racing in various forms. This one, well, it's not that dissimilar to what I used to deal with in real life. It's called the V8 Veterans, Neil. This is all about V8 supercars and some of the great circuits that you can race on up against some pretty stiff opposition, one would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm delighted to introduce Luke Holland. Luke is the league admin, or the man in charge of V8 Veterans. It's a fantastic place to race. They've certainly made me very welcome since I joined, and they're very patient of me sliding off the track and crashing into walls. So Luke, welcome, mate.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, Neil. Yes, we've seen your efforts so far this season. But,
Look,
V8's a big
allegedly.
Well.
I may have got DSQ'd for going backwards in the pit lane on race 2, but the less said about that, probably the better.
Yeah, we'll leave that one.
The thing I like about this, Luke, is V8 Veterans tends to suggest that I'm in there with a chance because I'm not that young.
Well, the league does cater to the over 40s exclusively. There is no one racing in the league under the age of 40, and it's all revolved around when the league was first conceived. I guess there was a place for some of the older guys on the iRacing platform to have a harbour away from from the young guns, I suppose you'd say, that while they're quick, maybe don't have the cool heads that some of the older guys do. So the league is targeted at that older age bracket, and that's shown with the kind of camaraderie and community spirit that we see in vets, which is something that we pride ourselves on.
Oh, note to self: cool heads. Try that. Okay, sweet. And what circuits do you race on? I mean, is being V8s as an Australian, or V8 supercars as an Australian type of category, is it just the Australian circuits, or you branching out to some of the more well-known tracks around the world?
Well, look, it would be fantastic if there were enough tracks to exclusively run Australian circuits on iRacing. That's just not the case, unfortunately. So, we do branch out, and while most seasons we do feature some, if not most, of the Australian circuits, we generally try to follow the iRacing calendar, the official season calendars, and that gives us the ability to have guys, using the setups that we create, and practicing on the circuits that they would be able to race in the official leagues, side by side with the Veterans League races. So, we've tried other formulas in the past where we'd branch off from that, but that seems to be more of a crowd favourite where they can synergise with what's happening on the iRacing official calendar. So.
Yeah, mate. So one of the highlights, I think, is you mentioned the setups, Luke. So it's obviously a fixed setup league. Tell us how that works, because there's always a huge amount of discussion each week about the setups, and I mean, overwhelmingly, it's a lot of respect and approval, I guess, for how much goes into putting them together and how good they are.
Well, look, it's no secret that the V8 supercar on the iRacing platform is one of, if not the hardest car to drive and to be able to, to manage in terms of tyre life and, even strategy. So the setups play a fairly big part in your tyre life and how the car steers and handles curbs, and we're fortunate enough to have someone with a lot of experience who goes through each week and spends countless hours, a member of the league, creating setups that are, they're still pointy and they're still quick, but they also are great on tyre life, and they cater to the guys right up the pointy end of the top split, all the way down to the guys who are really just trying to grasp the car. So we're pretty fortunate in that respect. And there's a lot of setup shops out there, and you can get setups that are very, very quick, but they favour the guys who can handle the loose cars, or are quite happy to deal with the oversteer. So what we have is a pretty good balance, I think. So.
No, definitely, and I think that's the overwhelming sense you get, as you say. There's obviously 3 splits that race in V8 Vets. So if you've got the real guns racing at the top of split 1, who use the same setup as the guys like me who go backwards in the bottom of split 3. I did ask actually if one of the setups could work better off road, but apparently that was a pretty low percentage request.
No, the setups definitely don't work off-road, but like you say, 3 splits, and that's just that's a product of how many numbers that we get. We'd run 1 split if we only had enough for 1, but I think the league season on season has grown in popularity, with last season I feel, or the current season being the most popular or the highest numbers. We've got over 130 entrants, and we regularly get 100 people driving across all of those splits, and like you say, the same setup applies to every single person. We do have open practice sessions where every person from the league, is invited and encouraged to utilize to practice on the setups, and you find guys all just getting in there from different teams, all mingling and all practicing together, which is great to see.
Yeah, look, I can't agree more. I mean, just one of the things that stood out to me is the courtesy that you see on track. You know, obviously, for the guys and the girls who are racing a little bit slower than some of the guns in the open practice sessions, there's never any hostility. Everyone says thank you when if you let them past or you pull over the side, and there's a lot of courtesy, which is it's a very welcoming and warm environment to race in. It's great.
Yeah, and that goes back to why the league was founded, and it started out as Mark Dial, he was the founding father of V8 Vets, and he's currently a split 2 driver. He just got together with a bunch of old blokes, and that was his thing. We just want to get away from everyone and have some nice, clean racing that's fair and courteous. But they still want to be able to take the gloves off and battle for position when it's time to hit the tarmac, which they do. So
sounds like it's everything open lobbies are not.
Pretty much. I mean, look, I guess the hard part is you go into an official race, and there's a guy. You might qualify well, you practice, and you spend a lot of time circulating, building some consistency and lap times, and then you just get taken out by someone who gets a great start into turn 1. We boast that we have live race control over all of our 3 splits, which gives some fair and consistent adjudication to the guys in those splits, and silly maneuvers, although not common. They do happen. Everyone has a bit of a moment every now and again, and the guys are there to make sure that doesn't go unpunished, I guess. But at least it's guys who are suffering because of it aren't left sort of left with their shoulders left with their hands up in the air thinking what do I do now, and that can be the case in officials. I've done that plenty of times, so it is a common theme with leagues to have that live race control, and admittedly it's difficult to make that happen over 3 splits, but it's one of the big attractions that you get in a league like this, is having, like I said, some fair and consistent adjudication on those kind of issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and again, it works really well. So, it's a credit to the processes you guys have put in place. So how can people get involved in the V8 Vets, and I guess what stage of the season are you up to at the moment?
So look, right now tonight we're actually racing the last race of the season. So season 13 championship is about to wrap up. If you go onto Facebook, you'll be able to get onto our page. If you just search V8 space veterans, like the letter V and the number 8, you'll find us there. There's a pretty distinct logo. Obviously, on the Player1 Sim Gear, Facebook page, we interact a little bit, and so there's some links from there to find us. We kick off next season. We've actually just moved from a 12-race season to a 10-race season format starting next year, and we're going to include some enduro championships towards the end of the year, which is going to be great to see. And that kicks off early next year in January. But pre-qualification will actually start in a couple of weeks. So, I don't know if there's a way that you can possibly link the pages, and then get people out there. But it's actually facebook.com/veterans V8 League.
Absolutely. And how does qualification work, Luke, for going into new season?
I just mentioned the pre-qualification. So what will happen is those that have never joined before, there'll be a week usually of pre-qualifying on 2 tracks, and so those 2 tracks are picked from the previous season's roster. So season 14 that's about to start will have 2 tracks from season 13, and we'll use the exact same setups and conditions that were utilised in those races from these random 2 tracks, and people will have a 4-lap attempt on 5 different nights for each track to qualify and set their best time, and then from there, people are ranked in order of the combination of their 2 fastest times to be ranked into splits. We also have anyone who's set a time in qualifying during that season they'll be eligible to use that time as their first time, and can improve on that through the pre-qualification process.
Can I just expand on the enduros? That you've really caught my attention with that. I think that's awesome. So what are you? I realise it may just be in the planning stage at the moment, but what are you planning for those enduros?
So currently, it's not solidified yet in terms of what tracks or distances we'll run. We've had a couple of ideas about, so for the first season in 2023, we won't run an enduro, but for the subsequent 3 seasons that fit into the calendar year, we will, and that'll be the last round of. It'll be basically in the week 13 of the corresponding iRacing season. We're thinking of doing something along the lines of say like a Sandown and a Phillip Island. We're thinking of doing something along the lines of a Sandown and a Phillip Island 500 and maybe a Bathurst 1000. So keeping that within the V8 Supercars class. And look, there are a lot of the Bathurst 1000s, and they get around the iRacing platform. And we do have quite a few of the V8 Vets drivers attend and race in some of those, but it's been a pretty popular request within the community. So I'd say that's probably what it will look like. And we're tossing up some different formats between whether or not we will pair top class, top split drivers with bottom split drivers, or just open it up to, to driving with anyone from within the league. So that hasn't been bedded down yet, but that's something that we're working on. But we're definitely going to be running that enduro series sort of side by side as the year progresses.
You've won me.
We'll send you the red
HK,
form.
Grant, I'm going to be trying to recruit you for the Player1 race team for the enduros, my friend.
Count me in. That is so much fun. I love that idea. I'm totally sold on it.
Look, the good thing is too, you don't have to be in it to win it, although you do have to be in it to win it, but you can enter and just circulate, and, sometimes it's just an accomplishment to get 161 laps around that panorama.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people just want to get in and, and just get home and have a nice clean race. And you get a sense of achievement out of it. And, and if we do go down like a Bathurst 1000 type arrangement, we'll be looking for, possibly even broadcasting it and doing again live race control. So all of those things, but to finalise all that, we're just still working on that at the moment.
Awesome. Luke, thank you so much, mate, for taking the time. We really appreciate it. To everyone out there, again, if you're over 40 and you're looking for a fantastic place to race V8s on iRacing, we thoroughly recommend you check out the V8 Vets on Facebook. You can check out all the links. Will be available on Player1 as well. And yeah, thanks again, Luke. We look forward to the new season starting.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Cheers, mate.
So that's a look at what's happening in league racing at the moment. What's happening with regards to hardware that's out there? What can enhance our experience behind the screen? Neil?
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks, I guess, or a good month or two, in fact, in the simulator world, both in terms of the flight side and also the racing side. So if we start off with the flight, at the start of November, the Microsoft Flight Simulator 40th Anniversary Edition launched. So it was a free update for players who already had it, and it brought a couple of new features to the game, and most notably helicopters, which had been very well received. It also brought gliders and a bunch of famous historical aircraft, including the Hughes H4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, a bunch of new missions, and also some new commercial airports as well. It also brought something that I know the commercial sort of flight sim world's been really looking for, which is a true-to-life Airbus A310 model. We also saw Next Level Racing launched their new Boeing flight simulator range. It's a dedicated range of flight simulators that's been produced in concert with the team at Boeing, and it comes out in 2 models. There's a commercial model and a military edition as well. So, and they vary slightly just in the look and the feel of them. But a couple of really nice dedicated flight sims to being brought to the market. So we thoroughly recommend you check them out, and we've got them on Player1. You can take a look at them. We also, in the hardware world, saw the arrival of butt kickers back in Australia. So for those of you who aren't familiar, butt kickers are haptic feedback devices that you fit typically onto your rig. They can also be mounted onto a chair as well. And they take feedback or telemetry from the game platforms, and they essentially convert it into vibrations. And it's a real extra way to add immersion to simulators, both flight and racing simulators. And it really adds an extra layer of the game. So again, that's the new Butt Kicker Plus and Pro models. They're in stock in Australia. So again, check them out. If we move more onto the racing side, Trak Racer announced something a little bit different as well just recently. They have announced that they're moving into the world of steering wheels. So they teased a steering wheel that's got an on-screen dash capable of displaying both SimHub as well as a proprietary software environment. Now, they're being very cagey on the details at the moment. They showed some really cool sort of dark images, which was nice to see, and we'll be obviously getting more information from Trak Racer. I believe they're expected to release around middle of next year. We'll also make sure that we bring you all the updates and a preview as soon as we have more to show. We also saw that they are getting very close to shipping out the TRX units. So anyone out there that's bought or that's seen their new Trak Racer TRX has been developed in association with the team at Alpine Racing. They look fantastic. They're a hybrid Formula 1/GT style rig with a very customized seat. They look super cool. They come in both a blue Alpine color and a black coloring tone as well. Again, check them out on the site. They look amazing, and we're expecting delivery of those to come out within the next few weeks or very early into January. Moza are back in stock in Australia. So Moza had a real flurry of activity when they launched a few months back, particularly as at the time there was very little Fanatec stock. And so when Moza launched their R9 wheelbase and their R16 base, they were quickly snaffled up by the market. And as a result, we quickly then went into a non-Moza availability world here in Australia. But I'm delighted to say the stock has arrived back in country. And again, you can check out the range. And importantly, we also have a new delivery from them, which is their R5 bundle. The R5 it's a kind of an entry-level direct drive wheel and wheelbase package. It includes both the wheel, the wheelbase, and a really cool set of pedals as well. So the items it comes with are their DDR5, which is a 5.5 Newton meter torque direct drive wheelbase. Very much like an entry level into the direct drive ecosystem, but it's also fully customizable using their Moza pit house control software. It includes their ES steering wheel, which is a round sort of all-purpose steering wheel, along with their SRP light pedals, which don't include a clutch. It also includes a table clamp. So again, really good if you don't have a dedicated rig, you can still make the step up into the direct drive ecosystems. Moving, I guess, a European brand called Assetto that many of you may be familiar with. They've announced that they're also bringing out another entry into their ecosystem, which is a set of direct drive wheelbases and wheels. So they announced their La Prima, which is a 12 Newton meter direct drive wheelbase, their Forte, which is an 18 Newton meter direct drive base, and then the top of their line is their Invicta, which comes in at 27 Newton meters, which is a really strong wheel. So they also included a couple of new wheels, including their Forte, which is a Formula wheel. And the Assetto gear, it's a European brand. We're not sure which carriers will be stocking it here in Australia at the moment. I think their first units are due to ship out to their early customers later this month, so late December. So we should see some of their wheels and wheelbases coming into the Australian market. I would expect around Q1 of next year. Keep an eye out. We're talking with the team at Assetto around potentially bringing in some of their gear as well. We already stock the Assetto pedal range on Player1. We're having a chat with them about potentially bringing in to the market their Forte 18 Newton meter package. Again, we'll keep you posted, so watch this space. And if you'd like more information, feel free to send us a message. It's also worth noting that the team at Next Level Racing have brought out a couple of new additions to their lineup. So their ERS2 seat has been launched. That comes in at $399. It's a really cool looking, very comfortable looking reclining seat. Again, check it out. It looks fantastic. If you're looking for an upgrade on your existing Next Level Racing rig seat, definitely looks something that'll look the part on the rig and will bring that comfort factor as well. They also launched a new entry level into their Elite range, which is super cool. So their Elite range has always kind of been the flagship for Next Level Racing, and it comes in two primary variants, their GT and their FGT, which is the GT is a dedicated GT cockpit. The FGT is their Formula/GT hybrid, so it can be both in the GT mode and the Formula mode. They've announced that they're bringing out an Elite Light range, which is essentially a lighter form factor version of the Elite. So it's a slightly thinner construction, slightly lighter weight aluminium profile, and allows them to bring the price point and make it, more accessible to people looking to move up into that class of cockpit. So that range starts at $899. And thoroughly check them out. They've got both the GT and the FGT models, along with all of their wheel plate and base options as well. And from the software side, I guess the other big announcements that we're seeing at the moment, we're starting to see more information from iRacing around what we can expect in their upcoming season. So the first season 1, 2023. They announced that they are releasing a new vehicle called the Toyota GR86 Cup Car, which is actually going to be making its real-world debut next year. They've developed this in alignment with the team at Toyota, and we think it'll launch maybe in the D class. So potentially it's going to be a general purpose, like all availability, single class vehicle, just like the MX-5, potentially either replacing the MX-5 or more likely maybe just intended as a beginner series just after the MX-5 Cup Car. Again, great looking car. Be really interesting to see what that handles like. They also announced a couple of new tracks or existing tracks that are going to be moving into like general availabilities. So that's the Virginia International Raceway. So that's going to become part of the base content. It's also going to receive an extensive art and surface updates via a new scan that they're going to do, which is going to overwrite the current version of the track. They also announced, if you're a dirt racer, that the Wild West Motorsports Park, it was one of their original short off-road releases when they launched, and it'll move to base content in order to, I think they're looking to sort of try and grow the appeal of the dirt racing side and add more content to that base content dirt racing package. They also announced a little while ago that they'll be making changes to the LMP2 class and the GT3 class. So GT3 is obviously super popular, and to quote iRacing, they've collaborated with real-world GT3 drivers for the upcoming GT3 update. Those updates will include a complete overhaul of the way the cars are, including a new tyre model, brake pads, rules, and the overall feeling of the cars. They're also implementing their new damage model on all of the GT3 cars, and to quote them, their tyres will have a sharper, more responsive feel moving forward, as well as a more clearly defined limit. And I saw a quote saying that they actually think that the tyre wear is going to be increased, so you may not even be able to get a full fuel stint out of a set of tyres now, which is going to add a more strategic element to the GT3 driving. So we're looking forward to seeing how the GT3 class looks and feels. We're looking to see if they maybe redress some of the variances and balance between the different cars within the class. You know, it's nice to not have as they make tweaks and adjust to always have like a peak car that everybody's using. We want to see more variety through the class, so hopefully we'll see that in the new release with the new performance and handling updates. I guess the last thing I want to mention is around the Simagic ecosystem. The FX Pro is arriving in Australia as we speak as well. If you haven't seen that yet or checked it out, go and check out our review. It's available on our YouTube page, available through our Facebook, etc. So we do a detailed, in-depth look at the FX Pro, including where we think it fits in the marketplace, and ultimately is it good value for money. It's a sort of premium style wheelbase or wheel coupled, and it couples with the Simagic ecosystem of bases, namely the Alpha Mini, and of course their Alpha Ultimate, which is their top of the line base. So again, you can check out the full range from Simagic on Player1. Go and take a look, and stay tuned for their launch of another round wheel coming to the Simagic ecosystem called the GTS. And we're going to have a detailed review of the GTS coming up in a couple of weeks as well. So stay tuned to our YouTube and our socials for that. And that, Grant, is a very quick run through, I guess, of what's been happening in the world of flight and racing as of late.
For more information on that, check out the link down below to the Player1 Sim Gear website. Well, there it is, our very first episode of Sim Stuff. We hope you've enjoyed it. We're looking forward to the second episode as well. We're catching up with Chad Nealon, who's the V8 Supercar Esports Series commentator, to find out a little bit more about how to get involved in that. But that's next time. Until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll look forward to catching up with you soon. Bye for now.